a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Oscar Wilde. Oscar Fingal O'Flahertie Wills Wilde was an Irish poet and playwright. After writing in different forms throughout the 1880s, he became one of London's most popular playwrights in the early 1890s. He is best remembered for his epigrams and plays. His novel The Picture of Dorian Gray, as well as the circumstances of his imprisonment and early death. Wilde's parents were successful Anglo-Irish intellectuals in Dublin. Their son became fluent in French and German early in life. At university, Wilde read greats. He proved himself to be an outstanding classicist, first at Dublin, then at Oxford. He became known for his involvement in the rising philosophy of aestheticism, led by two of his tutors, Pater and John Ruskin. After university, Wilde moved to London into fashionable cultural and social circles. As a spokesman for aestheticism, he tried his hand at various literary activities. He published a book of poems, lectured in the United States and Canada on the new English Renaissance in art, and then returned to London where he worked prolifically as a journalist. Known for his biting wit, flamboyant dress, and glittering conversational skill, Wilde became one of the best-known personalities of his day. At the turn of the 1890s, he refined his ideas about the supremacy of art in a series of dialogues and essays, and incorporated themes of decadence, duplicity, and beauty into what would be his only novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray. The opportunity to construct aesthetic details precisely, and combine them with larger social themes, drew Wilde to write drama. He wrote Salome in French while in Paris, but it was refused a license for England due to an absolute prohibition on the portrayal of biblical subjects on the English stage. Unperturbed, Wilde produced 4 society comedies in the early 1890s, which made him one of the most successful playwrights of late Victorian London. At the height of his fame and success, while the importance of being earnest was still being performed in London, Wilde had the Marquis of Queensberry prosecuted for criminal libel. The Marquis was the father of Wilde's lover, Lord Alfred Douglas. The libel trial unearthed evidence that caused Wilde to drop his charges and led to his own arrest and trial for gross indecency with men. After 2 more trials he was convicted and sentenced to 2 years hard labor, the maximum penalty, and was jailed from 1895 to 1897. During his last year in prison, he wrote De Profundis, a long letter which discusses his spiritual journey through his trials, forming a dark counterpoint to his earlier philosophy of pleasure. Upon his release, he left immediately for France, never to return to Ireland or Britain. There he wrote his last work, The Ballad of Reading Gaol, a long poem commemorating the harsh rhythms of prison life. He died destitute in Paris at the age of 46. Early life. Oscar Wilde was born at 21 Westland Row, Dublin, the second of 3 children born to Sir William Wilde and Jane Wilde. 2 years behind William. Wilde's mother was of Italian descent, and under the pseudonym Speranza, wrote poetry for the revolutionary Young Irelanders in 1848 and was a lifelong Irish nationalist. She read the Young Irelanders' poetry to Oscar and Willie, inculcating a love of these poets in her sons. Lady Wilde's interest in the neoclassical revival showed in the paintings and busts of ancient Greece and Rome in her home. William Wilde was Ireland's leading otophthalmologic surgeon and was knighted in 1864 for his services as medical advisor and assistant commissioner to the censuses of Ireland. He also wrote books about Irish archaeology and peasant folklore. A renowned philanthropist, his dispensary for the care of the city's poor at the rear of Trinity College, Dublin, was the forerunner of the Dublin Eye and Ear Hospital, now located at Adelaide Road. On his father's side, Wilde was descended from a Dutchman, Colonel de Wilde, who went to Ireland with King William of Orange's invading army in 1690. On his mother's side, Wilde's ancestors included a bricklayer from County Durham who emigrated to Ireland sometime in the 1770s. Wilde was baptised as an infant in St Mark's Church, Dublin, the local Church of Ireland church. When the church was closed, the records were moved to the nearby St Anne's Church, Dawson Street. Davis Coakley references a second baptism by a Catholic priest, Father Prideaux Fox, who befriended Oscar's mother circa 1859. According to Fox's own testimony written by him years later in Donohoe's magazine in 1905, Jane Wilde would visit his chapel in Glencree, County Wicklow for Mass and would take her sons with her. She then asked Father Fox to baptize her sons. Fox described it in this way: "I am not sure if she ever became a Catholic herself. But it was not long before she asked me to instruct two of her children, one of them being the future erratic genius, Oscar Wilde. After a few weeks I baptized these two children, Lady Wilde herself being present on the occasion." In addition to his children with his wife, Sir William Wilde was the father of 3 children born out of wedlock before his marriage: Henry Wilson, born in 1838, and Emily and Mary Wilde, born in 1847 and 1849, respectively, of different maternity to Henry. Sir William acknowledged paternity of his illegitimate children and provided for their education, but they were reared by his relatives rather than by his wife or with his legitimate children. In 1855, the family moved to No. 1 Merrion Square, where Wilde's sister, Isola, was born in 1857. The Wildes' new home was larger and, with both his parents' sociality and success, it soon became a unique medical and cultural milieu. Guests at their salon included Sheridan Le Fanu, Charles Lever, George Petrie, Isaac Butt, William Rowan Hamilton, and Samuel Ferguson. Until he was 9, Oscar Wilde was educated at home, where a French and a German governess taught him their languages. He then attended Patora Royal School in Enniskillen, County Fermanagh from 1864 to 1871. Until his early 20s, Wilde summered at the Villa Moytura House, his father built in Cong, County Mayo. There the young Wilde and his brother Willie played with George Moore. Isola died aged 9 of meningitis. Wilde's poem, Requiescat, is written to her memory. "Tread lightly, she is near under the snow, speak gently, she can hear the daisies grow." Trinity College, Dublin. Wilde left Patora with a royal scholarship to read classics at Trinity College, Dublin, from 1871 to 1874, sharing rooms with his older brother Willie Wilde. Trinity, one of the leading classical schools, placed him with scholars such as White Tyrrell, Arthur Palmer, Edward Dowden and his tutor, J. P. Mahaffy, who inspired his interest in Greek literature. As a student, Wilde worked with Mahaffy on the latter's book Social Life in Greece. Wilde, despite later reservations, called Mahaffy "my first and best teacher," and "the scholar who showed me how to love Greek things." For his part, Mahaffy boasted of having created Wilde. Later, he named him "the only blot on my tutorship." The University Philosophical Society also provided an education, discussing intellectual and artistic subjects such as Rossetti and Swinburne weekly. Wilde quickly became an established member. The Members' Suggestion book for 1874 contains 2 pages of banter mocking Wilde's emergent aestheticism. He presented a paper titled Aesthetic Morality at Trinity. Wilde established himself as an outstanding student. He came first in his class in his first year, won a scholarship by competitive examination in his second, and then, in his finals, won the Berkeley Gold Medal, the university's highest academic award in Greek. He was encouraged to compete for a demyship to Magdalen College, Oxford, which he won easily, having already studied Greek for over 9 years. Magdalen College, Oxford. At Magdalen, he read grades from 1874 to 1878, and from there he applied to join the Oxford Union, but failed to be elected. Attracted by its dress, secrecy, and ritual, Wilde petitioned the Apollo Masonic Lodge at Oxford, and was soon raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason. During a resurgent interest in Freemasonry in his 3rd year, he commented he would be awfully sorry to give it up if I secede from the Protestant heresy. Wilde's active involvement in Freemasonry lasted only for the time he spent at Oxford, and his membership of the Apollo University Lodge lapsed after non-payment of subscriptions. He was deeply considering converting to Catholicism, discussing the possibility with clergy several times. In 1877, Wilde was left speechless after an audience with Pope Pius IX in Rome. He eagerly read Cardinal Newman's books, and became more serious in 1878, when he met the Reverend Sebastian Bowden, a priest in the Brompton Oratory who had received some high-profile convert. Neither his father, who threatened to cut off his funds. Nor Mahaffy thought much of the plan. But mostly Wilde, the supreme individualist, balked at the last minute from pledging himself to any formal creed. On the appointed day of his baptism, Father Bowden received a bunch of altar lilies instead. Wilde retained a lifelong interest in Catholic theology and liturgy. While at Magdalen College, Wilde became particularly well known for his role in the aesthetic and decadent movements. He wore his hair long, openly scorned manly sports, though he occasionally boxed, and decorated his rooms with peacock feathers, lilies, sunflowers, blue china and other objets d'art, once remarking to friends whom he entertained lavishly, "I find it harder and harder every day to live up to my blue china." The line quickly became famous, accepted as a slogan by aesthetes, but used against them by critics who sensed in it a terrible vacuousness. Some elements disdained the aesthetes, but their languishing attitudes and showy costumes became a recognized pose. Wilde was once physically attacked by a group of 4 fellow students, and dealt with them single-handedly, surprising critics. By his 3rd year Wilde had truly begun to create himself and his myth, and saw his learning developing in much larger ways than merely the prescribed texts. This attitude resulted in his being rusticated for 1 term, when he nonchalantly returned to college late from a trip to Greece with Professor Mahaffy. Wilde did not meet Walter Pater until his 3rd year, but had been enthralled by his studies in the history of the Renaissance, published during Wilde's final year in Trinity. Pater argued that man's sensibility to beauty should be refined above all else, and that each moment should be felt to its fullest extent. Years later, in De Profundis, Wilde called Pater's studies, "that book that has had such a strange influence over my life." He learned tracts of the book by heart, and carried it with him on travels in later years. Pater gave Wilde his sense of almost flippant devotion to art, though it was John Ruskin who gave him a purpose for it. Ruskin despaired at the self-validating aestheticism of Pater, arguing that the importance of art lies in its potential for the betterment of society. Ruskin admired beauty, but believed it must be allied with, and applied to, moral good. When Wilde eagerly attended Ruskin's lecture series The Aesthetic and Mathematics Schools of Art in Florence, he learned about aesthetics as simply the non-mathematical elements of painting. Despite being given to neither early rising nor manual labor, Wilde volunteered for Ruskin's project to convert a swampy country lane into a smart road neatly edged with flowers. Wilde won the 1878 Newdigate Prize for his poem, Ravenna, which reflected on his visit there the year before, and he duly read it at Insenia, in November 1878. He graduated with a double first in his BA of Classical Moderations and Literae Humaniores. Wilde wrote to a friend, "The dons are beyond words, the bad boy doing so well in the end." Debut in society. After graduation from Oxford, Wilde returned to Dublin, where he met again Florence Balcombe, a childhood sweetheart. She became engaged to Bram Stoker and they married in 1878. Wilde was disappointed, but stoic. He wrote to her, remembering the 2 sweet years, the sweetest years of all my youth, they had spent together. He also stated his intention to return to England, probably for good. This he did in 1878, only briefly visiting Ireland twice. Unsure of his next step, he wrote to various acquaintances inquiring about classics positions at Oxford or Cambridge. The rise of historical criticism was his submission for the Chancellor's Essay Prize of 1879, which, though no longer a student, he was still eligible to enter. Its subject, historical criticism among the ancients, seemed ready-made for Wilde with both his skill in composition and ancient learning. But he struggled to find his voice with a long, flat, scholarly style. Unusually, no prize was awarded that year. With the last of his inheritance from the sale of his father's houses, he set himself up as a bachelor in London. The 1881 British census listed Wilde as a boarder at 1 Tite Street, Chelsea, where Frank Miles, a society painter, was the head of the household. Wilde spent the next 6 years in London and Paris, and in the United States where he travelled to deliver lectures. He had been publishing lyrics and poems in magazines since his entering Trinity College, especially in Cotabo's and the Dublin University magazine. In mid-1881, at 27 years old, poems collected revised and expanded his poetic efforts. The book was generally well received, and sold out its first print run of 750 copies, prompting further printings in 1882. It was bound in a rich, enamel, parchment cover and printed on handmade Dutch paper. Wilde presented many copies to the dignitaries and writers who received him over the next few years. The Oxford Union condemned the book for alleged plagiarism in a tight vote. The librarian, who had requested the book for the library, returned the presentation copy to Wilde with a note of apology. Richard Ellman argues that Wilde's poem, Elah, was a sincere, though flamboyant, attempt to explain the dichotomies he saw in himself. To drift with every passion till my soul is a stringed lute on which all winds can play punch was less enthusiastic. The poet is wild, but his poetry's tame, was their verdict. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?